So when I got in the studio today, I started looking at one of these pieces, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I really want this figure to fade more into the darkness," which led me down the path of thinking, why do I want these figures to blend farther into the darkness? And I think part of it is that I've been thinking a lot about memories and how oftentimes memories just naturally fade away, but also sometimes memories are intentionally pushed away. We will try to hide some past thing that we don't want to remember, but also sometimes just time passes and you just don't remember things. Like at one point my wife was like, "Oh, do you remember this trip we took to this place?" And I was like, "Absolutely not. I do not remember this trip." But sometimes it's just like I was looking at the piece while I was working on it, and I could not for the life of me remember the model's name. And it's about that sort of impact. The different occurrences have different impact on our lives at different times. I mean, I remember a time when I was a kid and I was, doing lots of drugs and making lots of trouble and just being a general pain in the ass to everybody. And I was proud of those. Like I was like, oh yeah, I'm a troublemaker. I do all these crazy things. And like the shock value was like, I just adored shock value, trying to shock people by telling them crazy stories of weird things. And that's something I think I sort of outgrew, because to a certain extent that shock value of things doesn't last, because the shock isn't as memorable. Shock is an initial impact and then it sort of fades away. Whereas if you try to do something that's sort of meaningful or impactful or sincere or whatever, vulnerable, whatever kind of words, then that's got a longer shelf life. It's got a longer remembrance. Like people will they'll remember a shock thing, but it becomes less shocking, But the point of the memories is of course I'm getting a little bit older, and some of my memories, it's not that they're necessarily fading. I sort of feel like memories are replaced by new memories. In many ways, like some of my early memories are just not as important. I don't need to remember them anymore. They don't have as much impact on my life now as they once did. I mean, when you're a kid, of course you have, it sounds silly, but you haven't lived a lot, so you don't have a lot of memories. As you get older, your 40s, your 50s, you have more history, and so there's only so much mental space to remember all of these things. And sometimes you just have to go, you know what, that's not as important. I don't need to remember that. Does the name of this particular model need to be in my short-term memory that I will be able to recall at any given moment? I don't think it does. But part of that is also for me, a lot of times memory is about choosing to remember something painful or choosing not to. There are many times in most people's lives, but in my life, that were painful, difficult, painful, whatever, any sort of phrasing you want for it. And sometimes I want to forget those things. Oftentimes it's the simpler things like breaking up with a lover or something like this. You don't want to sit around and dwell on either the act of, what you said, how you said it, were you mean, were they mean. You don't want to sit around and dwell on those things. And so to a certain extent, you can sort of let those things go over time. Yes, if you were not a nice person, you should learn from your mistakes and all that, but there is a certain extent of not needing to dwell on things. And I think that dwelling is a lot of why memories sort of go away because there are certain things not worth dwelling on. Like a couple of years ago, I don't know how many years ago it was now, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I had an old friend from high school reach out to me on some social media platform, I think it was Facebook, and said, "Oh yeah, I've been meaning to get up with you because I wanted to close the loop with you." And I was just like, close the loop with me? I don't understand what that term meant. I still don't, because I responded saying, I don't know what you need to close the loop on. I have very fond memories of our relationship, and there's nothing to close. We're on good terms as far as I'm concerned. And then I never heard from that person again. So that was kind of funny. It's like they really wanted to close the loop with me, and then I said everything's fine, and they're like, okay, great, moving on. And we go through this. We all go through this sort of like ebb and flow of wanting to make amends for past problems, and then wanting to try to mend fences of things that we feel should or could be mended. I'm not sure any of it is useful, really, in the grand scheme of it. I mean, if somebody is meant to be in your life, they'll be in your life, period. Like, it sort of ends there. But, yeah, there is a certain amount of sort of closure. I mean, the desire for closure is, like, ingrained in humanity. We all want closure, but closure is pretty much impossible, because I have found that even when I sort of quote unquote get closure, like I will go back and just talk to whoever it was that I feel like I have wronged or they have wronged me, and try to get some closure. But the thing is I don't forget the original problem. So like, okay, great, we had some discussion, we worked through it, and we're better now, but that thing didn't stop happening. I still have the memory of the thing that needed closure. One of my biggest one, boy, she's going to kill me if I tell them. I'm going to tell the story anyways, but she's going to kill me if she listens to this. But my high school girlfriend, whose name I will not disclose, she, from my memory, so like, of course I can only give from my perspective, but from my memory, she had broken up with me because I was getting ready to go away to college. I was 1 year older than her. And so we broke up, and then I went over lamenting about it over to this other friend's place, happened to be a young lady who I probably would have been dating had I not been dating my now ex-girlfriend at the time, but the girlfriend. And I ended up hooking up with her. And so the nature of that then turned around, and the next time I saw my high school girlfriend was at a party, and I showed up, and my ex-girlfriend wasn't there, but it was her party at her house, and I showed up, and this guy's like, "Hi, who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm Matt. I'm the girl who's throwing the party's ex-boyfriend." And she's like, "Oh, I'm her boyfriend." I'm like, "Oh yeah, how long have you been dating?" And then he sort of threw out that they'd been dating since, well, when I was still dating her. And I'm like, "Really? You've been dating for that long? That's interesting." So I was very angry at that, moving on. So like I was crushed. Oh, my girlfriend had cheated on me, blah, 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 because, that just happens in high school and college. People do that all the time. It's just the process, I guess. And years later, like literally years later, I think it was like a decade later, I happened to be in a city for a conference where that high school girlfriend lived. And I don't know how it happened, but she found out I was there, and she was like, "Hey, let's go out for dinner." I was like, "Okay, sure." And I was so prepared, ready to just rail into her. I was just like, "God damn it. I'm going to freaking chastise you for your cheating and blah, blah, blah." And when she arrived, she was ready, like guns blazing, to chew into me. and she just railed into me with such vigor and such anger towards me, some pent up decade of anger. I mean, I was pissed, but I wasn't like her. She was really angry. And she made a comment. She said, because of you, I had to be in therapy for 10 years. And I'm like, wow. I mean, it has nothing to do with her parents or her family or anything like that, which of course it completely did. But I'm sure I was a component in it for sure. I'm not negating my effects, but I was not the primary, I don't think. But anyways, she really, really needed closure. I wanted closure. I wanted to rail into her, but she needed closure. So I let her have it. I just let her rail into me for the entire dinner. And I was just like, oh gosh, okay, well, I mean, and in its own right, it was a sense of closure, like by letting her have that. It also created its own sense of closure. So like the memories of her cheating on me, I don't care anymore. I mean, it was high school. It's a thing, whatever. But then there's also the point of how long do we need to keep these memories? You know, how hard should I hold on to them? Going back to the painting process that I'm doing right now, which is the pushing things down into the darkness, basically. Like, how long do you have to hold on to these things? I'm a grudge holder. I probably have held on to things far too long. Many things. I still have grudges against my brother from the things that he did when he was like 15 years old, 16 years old. And I'm sure he would still hold on to those grudges to me if he were still alive, but he's not. So it's my grudge to be held, I guess. And the nature of like grudges and holding on to things, it's not really that healthy. Well, you think it is. You're like, oh, I need to keep this pain, this suffering in my mind. Make sure it's not forgotten, all that kind of crap. No, you can forget it. It's not important, really. Like, all the negative stuff is not really important. It's not going to make you a better person or even a worse person, I hope, depending on how profound the memory is or the impact of the thing that caused it. But for me, they were all just sort of a series of. So it's not like I have this like, oh my gosh, I was, you know, physically abused on this day and this thing, and I'll never forget them for this thing. Like, I don't have that. What I have is a series of subtle things, little minor things that just add up to something major over time and over the layers, the quantity of these things. Like the amount of times I was ostracized from a group or somebody, a group of people I wanted to be part of that they didn't want me to be part of. Like, these kinds of memories, and we all go through them. We all want to be part of some crowd that doesn't want us to be part of their crowd, and it's a struggle to come to terms with that. But and then, you know, this sort of relates to the whole idea of like wanting to find a tribe in our adult sort of creative artistic life. And it's still a thing that I find very important to have. But the years of rejection and people not being willing to possibly, you know, and I say this not because I'm judging or criticizing everybody else, but I probably was as guilty as they were of not being included. So not to say that it's there, like it's, no, Not to say it's their fault I wasn't included, because I probably didn't do enough. So it sort of works both ways. You can't sit here and say, oh, they should have blankety blank, been nicer, done more, whatever. It's not their fault. It's both sides. It takes two to tango, as they say. And so it's all of our faults. You know, like, it wasn't just them. They were their part of it, and I was my part of it. And it just didn't work. And that's how it goes. It's unfortunate that that's how it goes, but that is just how it goes. In relationship to my life, how does this impact my work and all that? It's because of this desire / need to either repress memories or exaggerate memories. Not even exaggerate, but just sort of keep them fresh. Like, there are things that I want to be the memories that define me as a person, and there are memories that I don't want to define me as a person. And that's where I think it's sort of an interesting balance, because there are things that other people would say, oh, you're like this, you're like that, because that's their memories of me, but they're not necessarily the way I want to be remembered or the way I want to think about myself. And so it's the choice of which memories we keep alive, which ones we think are important and impactful, that I feel like make a huge difference in sort of the ongoing nature of defining ourselves. Okay, I keep saying ourselves, and I keep being very sort of subjective about this. Like, oh, it's all about everybody, but it's about me. Like, how do I define myself? And that's an ongoing struggle that I get to deal with constantly. How do I want people to see me? How do I see myself? And what kind of person do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be remembered as? And of course, this is all heightened now in my life because I'm watching my parents get older, and I'm thinking about things like, how will my daughter remember them? Which she might not. They might pass away before she has any great memory of them. And then, of course, how will my daughter remember me? I can't control that. And this is, maybe that's part of this underlying thing, is trying to control the narrative of who we are. I mean, we all want to control the narrative, but sometimes life sort of has its own plans. In the case of memories, the choice of which memories to keep and continue to have associated in my life is an interesting choice. I don't know, unfortunately, it's like I'm a bit of a sadist, that I enjoy the painful memories in many ways, because I feel like pain and difficulty are stronger definers than good and easy and fun. Though I do have good, fun, fond memories of all kinds of crazy things in my life, they're not necessarily what defines me. And I feel like the nature of it defines me more by the difficulties. They often, the old saying of, you're defined by how you are in the most difficult situations more than how you are in the best of times. And I think a lot of that's true. And I think a lot of that is instilled into me now, in that I still define myself by, I don't want to say the worst case scenarios, but certainly difficult times. I define myself by how I deal with difficulty. And so I try to keep some of those difficult things to remember difficulty. But in doing so, I always have to try to balance it. But this is the nature of sort of covering things up. I want to cover things up. I want to hide things. But on the other hand, I want to confront things, and I want to be participatory in the things. I don't want to be that kid that I was, that shy kid that didn't want to do this and that didn't want to participate, that was unwilling to do whatever. When I was in high school, there was this girl, Angie, and she sat me down one night. Well, she didn't sit me down one night. We were sitting down one night, and we were talking, and she said to me that I was a beautiful building that nobody ever entered. And personally, for years, I loved being called that. I was like, oh yeah, that so defines me. Now, 30 years later, I think that's a very sad statement about me. And I kind of wish that wasn't true. But it certainly was true at that time. And it's probably still true to a certain extent these days. I'm not the most... I am an utterly open book. I am happy to talk about anything in my life, as you can tell, because I'm telling these stories on the internet. But I'm not happy to dwell on them, to fixate on them, to overanalyze them, which probably is to my detriment. I probably should want to dwell more on these things and how they have impacted my life over the years, because they have. Sorry, I'm playing with tape. And these memories have created the sort of nature of who I am. And that's a fact. And I just need to sort of just accept that. But the question, of course, is how much do I accept it? How much do I let them dictate and control me? Because that's part of control is another word. That word keeps coming up. But the nature of sort of like how much I let them be in charge of my choices and my opportunities, my limitations, the whole point of trying to be better means that I have to learn to let go. And it's that letting go that is some of the hardest things, specifically of painful memories. Painful memories are so hard to let go of, but they are the most necessary to let go of. As I said, I have many of them from my childhood, for sure. I have many of them from relationships over the years. I mean, we all have gone through some amount of pain and suffering in our lives. I've never met a single person that says, I haven't had a single problem in my whole life. Like, we all have them. The question is how long do we let them rule us? How much do we let them rule us? Do they overwhelm us? Do they define us? I often think about like how easily any point in my life I could have spiraled out of control and turned into, I don't know, we'll call it like the worst case scenario of my life kind of thing. Sometimes when I see, homeless people or crazy people on the street, I'm like, that could have been me. And if I had made any decision differently. But for some reason, I was able to make, I'm not going to say I made best decisions. I made some really bad decisions. But I didn't make those just bad decisions, like those final bad decisions. So I've got lots of skeletons-ish kind of things. But to me, skeletons are not like things that I hide, but there's things that they're in my past. I don't really want to confront them anymore, but yet I guess they are still being part of my art in some way. So I guess I still am confronting them in my own sordid way, or in my own not healthy way. I'm not confronting them. Maybe I should confront them more. Maybe I should be more open and about these past things. But the thing is, they're past. So like, how do they directly impact my daily life? They don't. How do they impact my current relationship? Probably more than I would like to imagine, because, baggage, basically these memories, these histories, these events from my past basically equate to my baggage. And whether that's things my parents did or didn't do, or things that my past lovers did or didn't do, whatever, it's all baggage in many ways. And we just have to go, okay, that's my baggage. Like before I was married, I used to say that what I really want from a spouse is somebody with complementary baggage. So basically not the same baggage as me, but baggage that, I can help them with their baggage. They can help me with my baggage. That was my hope. I'm not sure I got that, but that was always my hope. I thought it was a really poetic way to describe that. But anyways, my memories. So layering as an artistic technique became my method of addressing memories, because they layer. That's one of the things is, okay, I had a situation, let's say, in my childhood that then got repeated by a boss at some job, that then got sort of repeated again by some relationship. And so these kinds of things often repeat themselves. And it's that layered process of like, okay, this happened and that happened. And then, so like, not only does this annoy me, but it annoys me because it's happened before. Now it's happening again. Or it's different. Like, I had a bad boss in the United States and that sucked. And then I went to the United Arab Emirates going, oh, this will be better. It'll be different. And now it's exactly the same. People are the same everywhere. So bad bosses are bad bosses no matter where you live. And the nature of like the bad boss thing, we can equate that to like relationships. Like you every time I get out of I did get out of a relationship. I'm currently married, but every time I got out of a relationship, I always say, okay, I'm not going to choose to be in a relationship with a person like that anymore. Like, that didn't work for me. My entire life, I swear to God, my entire life is just basically a series of figuring out what I don't want. I have done all kinds of research into all kinds of different things in life, and I'm always finding the things that I don't want in life while I'm striving to try and find what I do want in life. I figured out a lot of the negative sides. I figured out what I don't want more so, like my wife constantly says to me like, oh, you don't work very hard. You have a life of leisure. And I'm like, yeah, planned, intended, purposeful. When I was a roadie, I have this great memory, very distinct memory of why I've chosen a life like this. I was a roadie in the 930 Club doing, rock and roll, touring, lights, sound, all that kind of stuff. And And we were up late at an after-hours party, doing lots of cocaine, having a lot of fun. It was after a Tricky concert, so we were all wearing drag. I don't know why, but the whole crew was dressed in drag. I just went along with it, and I was wearing this really nice spandex, like Richard Simmons style, sort of red. I think it was red, and I can't remember the other colors. But anyways, and it was an after hours party. So it was like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning when the party ended. We went out on the street and we sat on the street, and this is one of those things, like, this was an impactful memory. And so I remember it because I still try to remember. I actively want to remember it because it's still important to me. So anyways, we were out on the street, early in the morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning on a weekday. And we were watching all these people. This was in Washington, D.C. And we were watching all these sort of, political people, business people, corporate people walking around in their suits with their briefcases. And they're all sort of just trudging like all looking down, all of them uninterested, all of them sad, tired, unhappy. And then we looked at each other and we're like, we were just up all night partying like rock stars in drag, having a blast, and probably being paid more than most of these people. And we're like, yeah, I never want to wake up in the morning and dislike my day ahead of me. I want to always enjoy my day ahead of me. I want to have a sense of desire to participate instead of sort of dread and sadness and depression about the fact that I have to do something. I mean, I get it. The jobs are jobs and you have to do things, but you don't have to hate your job. You don't have to love your job, but you don't have to hate it either. So, and that's that balancing act of like, I want to at least not hate. And that's a fond memory that I have tried really hard. And I believe I have, to many extents, attained a lot of that, except for some people, my wife, nagging at me to try to be more like them. Because that's one of those life characteristics that people look at their lives and they say, oh, everybody should be more like me. No, everybody should be themselves. So my life choices are to have a more relaxed, enjoyable life, and whereas other people are a bit more intense or normal, let's say, because like creative people, we're not normal. I want to have freedom of time, of space, energy, money, all this. Whereas most people desire to have the stability of a 40-hour work week that they know they go into their job at 9 a.m. on Monday morning and they leave at 5 p.m. on Friday and they get their paycheck and all this. And I just don't want that. I mean, I do want the stability, but I don't want the rest of the stuff that comes with the stability. So it's how much are you willing to sacrifice for, rewards, and are those rewards enough to keep you motivated? I don't have the answer to that question for you, but as you can tell, I have that answer to that question for me.